when I'm looking at how education is changing, how teachers are feeling burnt out, I feel like that a lot of the newer, younger generation who are more enthusiastic are not that enthusiastic about teaching. And I fear that our future is going to be AI driven and our students aren't going to learn from real people and real experiences. I think that they're going to start learning from some kind of robotic, connection based apparatus that's going to make students not really know how to relate, so they can bring out. A teacher can see what you need and pivot on the spot. An AI bot can't.
That's
An
right.
AI system can't. Teachers see that. And a lot of these young teachers that have that talent and love what they're doing aren't getting the opportunity because they're leaving, because of money, because of burnout. So one of the things that I'm trying to do in the industry is to prevent teacher burnout by making them better to each other and bring the creativeness.
Welcome to Golden Years Empowerment, where we help you to stay strong, sharp, and thrive to 95 and beyond. My name is Gail Nichols, and just before we jump into this podcast today's conversation, I wanted to tell you, you're in for a real treat. When I sat down with Dr. Anthony Richiez, I immediately understood why he is such a sought-after speaker, educator, and transformational leader. Not only is he a TEDx speaker and an author, and an innovation strategist, as well as a distinguished Toastmaster, he's also one of the warmest and most engaging people you could ever meet. And what I love most about our conversation is that this wasn't just about education. It was about people. It was about connection, communication, leadership, inspiration, and helping others believe in their own potential. Dr. Richiez shares powerful insights from years of transforming classrooms, empowering teachers, and helping students move from disengaged and discouraged to confident and thriving. He said he himself was a terrible student, and he vowed to make teaching others totally different experience than what he had. So much about what he talks about applies to all of us, whether you are a teacher, a parent, a business owner, a speaker, a leader, or simply someone who wants to make a greater impact in the lives of others. And of course, since Dr. Richiez and I are both fellow members of the Florida Speaker Association and Toastmasters International, we had a lot of fun talking about communication and personal growth and the power of finding your voice. So grab a cup of coffee or tea, water, whatever you please. Just relax and enjoy this lively and inspiring conversation I just had with Dr. Anthony Richiez. And please like and share this conversation with others that you know would also find it interesting and informative. Just click the subscribe button below so you don't miss another episode. Thank you so much for joining us. Do I call you Anthony,
You can call me
Tony?
Anthony. Anthony's fine.
Anthony's
Anthony's
fine.
fine, yes.
Okay, great. Well,
Yes.
Anthony, I know it's Dr. Richie.
Yes, yes.
How did you get your doctorate?
How did I get it, or why did I get it?
Or both of those?
Well, I got it through a lot of hard work. I'll tell you why I got my doctorate. And it's an interesting story. My father has always been the black sheep of his family, right? My father had a brother and two sisters, and all of my grandfather's brothers were all judges and lawyers. And my grandfather decided to be a school teacher. And they looked at him like, school teacher, you don't have the status that we have. So then my grandfather went and got his doctorate degree when he was 65 years old and became a college professor. This was in Dominican Republic. So then my father came to the US, and that upped our status a little bit more because now, we're Americans, technology and all these different things. And then they still looked down on my dad because my dad never finished high school. My mom told me these stories. My dad never told me he didn't finish high school. My dad had a lot of businesses. He had a car repair company. He had a restaurant. He had a dry cleaner. He was a serial entrepreneur way back in the 70s and the 80s. So then when I started learning about my family and I got involved with education, I said, you know what? If my grandfather can do it, then I can do it. And then I put the effort in to get my doctorate degree in education because I was in education. I wanted to kind of follow in his footsteps and also bring that prestige back to that side of the family that everybody looked down because we weren't doctors and lawyers. Because originally I wanted to become a lawyer. And then my dad said, lawyers work for people. Why don't you become something that somebody works for? And I said, you know what, Dad, I'm going to start thinking about that because I have my master's in business. But then when I got into education and I started teaching business courses at the local university, I realized that in order to reach the pinnacle of my profession, I should get my doctorate degree. And that's why I got my doctorate. And that's the reason why and how, through a lot of hard work. Well, congratulations, doctor. That's very impressive.
Because
Thank you.
that took many years
It did.
and many, many hours.
Ooh, a lot of hours.
And yet you were raising a family. I
Absolutely.
understand you have 3 children?
I have 3 children, 3 grandchildren.
Wow, you've been busy.
I've been a busy man.
No
Yes.
grass growing under your feet.
No, not at all. Not at all. You're right.
And you look very happy. You look very serene. Are you actually that way, or are you like the duck that's swimming like this with the little feet are going?
No, that's not me. I'm not that duck. No, I'm always in a good mood. I'm always in a good mood. I like being around people. People give me energy. That's why I got involved with teaching. Just being in a classroom with people and having people enjoy hearing my stories, because I tell a lot of good stories, having them laugh, but most importantly, having them really understand what they're learning really gives me joy. So I've always been in front of people. And I didn't start thinking about teaching until I went to an acupuncturist. I was in sales and I hated sales. Oh my God, I hate sales. And I was feeling really depressed. A friend of mine was a Toastmasters member. His wife was an acupuncturist. He said, why don't you come by and have her treat you? I said, sure, no, not a problem. I did martial arts when I was younger. So I went and I was telling her I'm feeling a little bit depressed. So we started having a conversation and I was telling her that I had a part-time martial arts school that I ran out of a park, a local park, and I had some students. And she says, Anthony, did you ever think about teaching? And I said, no, why? She says, you light up when you talk about teaching. Your whole aura changes when you talk about teaching. And that's when I first started thinking about teaching. And then I became a college professor and I realized that this is the profession I want to do for the rest of my life. I love what I'm doing. I love being around people. And I love it when the light bulb goes on in a student's brain. And that's the satisfaction that I get every single day when I'm teaching. That's what I love about it.
That is fantastic. Well, that's fascinating. It's interesting how sometimes the goal we go after is not our real calling. Maybe we're told that this is what we're supposed to do. Like I became a nurse,
Mm.
not because I wanted to be a nurse, but that when I grew up, girls were supposed to be teachers, nurses, or secretaries. So I took a typing class and I decided I didn't like that, but it came in very handy for using keyboards later.
Mm. Mm.
And then in the summer camp, I was a counselor. And the only way I could deal with it finally at the end is that we had a screaming contest with all the students and
Wow.
I won. So I
Wow.
figured I'm not designed to be a teacher. I really wanted to be in journalism and I was writing for the school newspaper. I had a radio show and all that. Dad said, no, you're going to be a nurse.
Wow.
And you actually get paid $15 a month while you're in nursing school
Wow.
for 3 years. So I became a nurse, but it became a great foundation because nurses learn how to handle all kinds of people and we learn how to deal with difficult situations, organize things. So when you were in sales, you probably learned a lot about people skills.
Yes, I did.
You're probably using them with your students today.
I am. I am. Funny enough, I created a concept called dynamic teaching. And what I did is I took the concepts of comprehension on one side, and then the skills of public speaking, persuasion, and connecting with people. And I put those two things together to create a dynamic teaching framework. And I realized that became something that was successful for me. I taught at a local technical college and I was the business professor. I was the lead business professor. Then I became the trainer and things of that nature. But while I was teaching, other teachers were telling me that their students were missing their classes because they were standing outside my door. I always left my door open because my class was so interesting for them.
Oh,
And then some of them wanted to sit into my classroom. And I said, sure, but don't you have a class? And they said, yeah, but I can miss the class. So they came in and I would do my lectures and have the activities going on. And I did all these different things for these students. And a few of them said they wanted to change their major. And I said, oh, wait, don't change your major. If this is what you wanted to do, and I give them the classic, this is what your love is. Oh, no, you teach better than they do. So then I started doing in-service workshops for the other teachers. And they started learning my system. Then I eventually became the associate dean and I started doing workshops for all of them. We were a chain of 10 different campuses in South Florida. So then I became the regional trainer and I started training everyone. And then I created something called Teachcraft. I said, let me make this into something formal. I needed to give it a name. So I called it Teachcraft. And then I did that in 2011. And all of the students, all their test scores went up, engagement went up, attendance went up, and teacher happiness went up. Teachers felt like they were fulfilled in what they were doing. So that kind of led me to love teaching more, but love teaching teachers how to teach better.
oh, okay. So it's more like a B2B business in a way. So
Absolutely.
then it blossomed out from there like the amoebas, they all
Yep.
start
Abs-
subdividing.
Absolutely.
So what is your main focus these days? Is it still teaching teachers?
Yes, it is. It is. So I go to school districts, a lot of them private and charter, some public, and I do workshops and professional development seminars. I do full day trainings and I teach their teachers how to teach better. When I did my TED talk, I gave a little bit of my framework. So if you look up the paradox of teaching and you'll see TEDx Miramar, you'll see that I use the dynamic teaching method using the phrase or the word dynamic. So when I was creating Teachcraft, I said, what can I describe myself as? And one of the teachers, his name was Donald, he said, I love the way you teach. He says, you don't know this, but I was standing outside your classroom listening to how you speak, and I love the way you do it. It's very dynamic. And I said, oh, that's interesting. I like that word. It has a nice ring to it. And, dynamic is the word, dynamic. It means something to people. So I looked up the definition of dynamic in the dictionary, and they had 3 attributes: energy, vigor, and motion. And I said, that's what I've been doing. So I honed in on that and I started becoming energetic. I made the curriculum vigorous. I made students really work for what they needed to learn. And there was always motion involved. Because one thing I realized, if you're staring at something for about 2 minutes, you're going to fall asleep. Nowadays, the attention span has gone down. Sometimes it's about 4 seconds, especially with the scrolling and everything. You have to get people's attention very quickly. So I've always kept that as a DNA of my teaching structure, and that's why I call it dynamic teaching. So that made me very successful at the college level. And then when I started teaching the middle school level, oh my God, I started seeing all kinds of accolades, all kinds of successes and results with student grades, but most importantly, teacher satisfaction. So that's what I'm doing now. I love doing it. I love when teachers come back to me and say, wow, this is amazing. Here, let me tell you one story. There was a teacher, he taught social studies before I taught social studies. And because that's my jam. Social studies is my jam. I love history. I'm a history buff. He was talking to me in the teacher's lounge about how he's struggling with his students. His students aren't paying attention to him. He can't really get them to engage. And I just used a couple of the things that I've used with the dynamic teaching framework. And Gail, he came back to me, had a piece of paper in his hand with results from these students. And he's like, oh my God. He actually said this. He says, you're the Pied Piper. I said, what is going on? And that's when I said, you know what? This could be a business that I can, instead of just keeping it to myself and teaching my friends and my colleagues, this could be a business that I can use to kind of spread dynamic teaching around the country and maybe even around the world. So that's what I'm committed to doing. And that's what I'm striving for right now, to create a national or global organization that teaches teachers how to teach better in the classroom.
And that reminds me, and I won't name names or anything, but there was a lady that I read about that always failed in school math. She was dismal at it. And when she years later said, I'm smart in everything else, what is it about math? Maybe it's how I learned. And she went back and she became eventually a math professor and then developed a course that's now around the world teaching people how to learn. And she's written books on the subject, how to be a math whiz, even if you failed algebra, which I would qualify for. I'm not that passionate about math, so I'm not going to go and follow it. But it's the system. It's the method of learning, which sounds like you have broken it down into component parts, put it together like an equation or maybe like a building block set. And when it works, when the system is right, then you can roll it out. How do you get the word out? How do you find gigs?
Well, let me backtrack a little bit. So there's something interesting about what you said, Gail, about how she was a terrible math student. I was a terrible student, period. I mean, I was that student that nobody wanted in the class. I think I had ADHD before ADHD was a thing. And I couldn't relate to any of my teachers. On my TEDx, The Paradox of Teaching, I said that there's only 2 things that I learned in high school. I learned how to drink beer and play basketball, because I don't remember anything or any of the names of any of my teachers. But then when I got into education, I said, how do I teach me 20 years behind or 30 years ago? How do I get to that person? And I realized that students, I wasn't dumb. Students aren't dumb. They're bored by teaching methods that are outdated. Teaching methods that were successful 100 years ago, 200 years ago are not relevant now. Students don't want to sit there and get lectured to. They want to be part of their learning. And if you look at how social media works and how it keeps people engaged, they gamify it. There's dopamine hits that happen every single day where people just scrolling, what they call doom scrolling these days. So I took the elements of today's existence and today's reality and put that into my framework. So when I want to teach students who are like me, I want to keep them engaged and have us compete with the social media world that we live in. And when a teacher can compete with the social media world, students want to come to class, students want to learn from the teacher, and students get more engaged with their own learning. And that's what my system does. That's what my company does. Now, to answer the other question, the way I get speaking opportunities, I speak at conferences, I talk to teachers, I do stuff on social media, not as much as I want to. And people learn about what I'm doing and they're curious. But most importantly, parents want their students to be engaged in school. They don't want their students to say, oh, I can't wait till 3 o'clock so I can head on out of here. They want to hear what's happening in class. What makes a parent really enjoy what I'm doing is when they tell their son or their daughter, what did you learn in school today? You know, mom, my teacher was saying this and I learned this. Hey, did you know this and this? And they get really animated because I've had parent teacher conferences and the parents are like, oh my God, you're Dr. Richiez? All they do is talk about you. Oh my goodness, this and that. And I love hearing that. So the parents are my biggest advocate. The parents are the ones that want their students to learn. The teachers just haven't been taught how to teach this way. They've been taught the way they learn. And if I taught the way my professors and my teachers taught me, I'll be a terrible teacher. I have to think in terms of how students learn. And that's what made my system a little bit better. So to answer your question, I get a lot of my speaking opportunities from referrals and people that request me and people say, hey, tell me more about that. When I go to conferences, I constantly talk to educators and they say, you know, our teachers are feeling burnt out. Teachers are leaving the profession. I read a study recently and it said 53% of teachers feel burnt out. And they're leaving the profession, especially the younger teachers. They're leaving the profession. And if you look at overall, 49% of all the other professions on an average leave their profession. So teachers are leaving in droves more than anything else because it doesn't pay well as much as it should. And you do a lot of things. You think that you're going into teaching just to give information, but you don't realize that you're a psychologist, a traffic cop, you're a MMA fight referee, you're a administrative assistant. You're doing all these different things. I mean, I only listed 4 things that just came top of mind, but there are about 20 or 30 extra things that are not part of the job description, and they feel like they're overwhelmed. So when I talk about dynamic teaching and it makes the classes easier, a lot of them put all these things away. Let me say this. The biggest mistake that school districts make is giving teachers the wrong professional development, because a lot of them give the professional development that is not relevant to the students per se. They give professional development that they have to check off certain boxes. And the students, they don't want to get more information. They want to be engaged. Another mistake they make is that the professional development is not what the teachers are looking for. It's conducive to what the administration has. So for example, I worked for a school district and they had new teacher academy. I went to the new teacher academy. All it was how to do the grading system, how to fill out certain forms, how to analyze an IEP, which are very helpful, but no one talked about what happens in the classroom and your craft. That's why I call my system Teach Craft. Nobody taught the teacher how to teach better because they figure that teachers can figure that out on their own, but sometimes they can't. And that's a void that I'm filling in the industry. So those are the 2 mistakes they make. When I'm looking at how education is changing, how teachers are feeling burnt out, I feel like that a lot of the newer, younger generation who are more enthusiastic, I'm not that enthusiastic about teaching. And I fear that our future is going to be AI driven and our students aren't going to learn from real people and real experiences. I think that they're going to start learning from some kind of robotic, connection-based apparatus that's going to make students not really know how to relate to each other and bring the creativeness that they can bring out. A teacher can see what you need and pivot on the spot. An AI bot can't. An AI system can't. Teachers see that. And a lot of these young teachers that have that talent and love what they're doing aren't getting the opportunity because they're leaving, because of money, because of burnout. So one of the things that I'm trying to do in the industry is to prevent teacher burnout by making them better. A lot of the administrative things that I needed to do in the classroom, I did it right before I left. And I didn't spend a minute after school. I didn't take work home with me. I did it all in the classroom. That's what the dynamic system does. Because when you're better at teaching, you have more time during class time to do a lot of the administrative stuff. I had students doing activities that they learn that are fun while I'm doing administrative stuff, keeping my eye on them right there in the classroom, as opposed to doing it for 5 hours later on. So those are the kind of things that I'm looking at to help teachers get better at what they do, but also help me grow my business by helping teachers become better and helping schools get higher achievements.
What is it that's the driving force for someone to be a teacher? Like when I became a nurse and I went through a 3-year like an internship where we learned in the classroom, but then we got to apply it in the wards. And they would always put us where the really old people were. So when we unfortunately didn't do it properly, they didn't notice, or they were very forgiving, whatever. I had a lot of encouragement from the older ladies, especially. But one of the things we were taught was that when you walk into a room, you walk in beside somebody, they're terrified because they're in hospital, they're sick, they don't know what's going to happen to them, they're feeling vulnerable. And so the first thing we do is we take their hand and smile and say something. So you've got the touch and you also have the eye contact and the smile because we gave them hope that somebody cared. So how does that relate to, let's say, in somebody who wants to be a teacher? Obviously, it's a helping profession. They're helping people. Do they get some kind of encouragement to make that personal connection with their students?
Sure. So I'm glad you asked that question, Gail. Someone posed that question at a conference. We had a little breakout session. We had this long discussion about it. And what I realized is that the majority of teachers became teachers because a teacher in their life made a difference in their life. So these teachers in this profession, they want to make a difference in somebody else's life. And after we had that discussion, I asked every single teacher that I have a polite conversation with, I asked them, why did you get into teaching? And they don't exactly say it that way, but when you start hearing them talk, they want to make a difference in someone's life because somebody made a difference in their life. And when I hone in on that, I said, did somebody make a difference? If you ask any teacher, who was your favorite teacher when you were younger? They know the name. I think every person in America around the world, they say, who's your favorite teacher? They'll know because that person made an impression on them. So a lot of teachers want to make a difference because that's fulfillment in their life. And the reason why teachers are leaving the profession is because they're not experiencing that fulfillment. They're experiencing the bad part of the job, the burnout part of the job, the non-connection part of the job, all the administrative stuff, all the compliance, all the issues of class management, all these different things. They're dealing with that. Then it feels like a job, not like a passion. And the reason they got into it is to make a difference. So part of my job is to make teachers feel fulfilled again in their profession and to love their profession. Because once they love their profession, the students are going to love them and everything gets better.
Yeah, so I can see that. The whole idea is that you spend so many years in class. I was an Air Force brat, so I moved regularly and I skipped a couple of grades and I advanced a couple of grades. It was kind of a mishmash. And somehow I came out the other end, but I never thought about grades. I wasn't there. I just went there because I was supposed to go there. And I remember my husband saying that when he was in school, he was always staring out the window because he really wasn't connecting with the teacher. Now, he ended up being a very brilliant guy, but he spent years staring out the window and probably letting the world go by, much like possibly I did too. We weren't taught by our parents, you have to get A's and you have to study like some cultures do. We were more hands off or see you at the end of the day kind of thing. When you're dealing with your teachers, when they see somebody staring out the window or just sort of being there to be there, how do they handle that?
So I tell them to leave them alone and talk to them afterwards. One of the things I learned is that if it's not a disruptive behavior, leave it alone. Find out later. Because if you put them on the spot, especially the younger in grade you go, the more they start wigging out. And then when you get into the high school age where they think they're really cool, and what are you talking about? Then they fight back at you. If somebody's staring out the window, they're thinking about something. Later on, say, hey, what were you thinking about? That's pretty interesting. And let me address the thing about the grades, right? So a D is a passing grade. It's not the greatest grade in the world. And a lot of parents, I think they judge their parenting skills by the grades that the kids get. Oh, little Johnny got an A, did you know? And what if little Johnny got a C? Are you going to still brag? No, but you still love little Johnny. It becomes a pressurized thing where the parents are putting pressure on the kids. My philosophy is you teach, have the kids learn and not think about the grade. Have them engaged in learning and understanding things, because if they understand it well, and if you get the information in their brains for it to be memorable enough, and I really studied memory, memorable enough, when the test comes, they're going to know what that is, and they're going to get a passing grade. Whatever the grade is, they're going to move on with life. Because there are certain things that I picked up when I was young, and I wasn't the greatest student. But later on in life, I said, I know that, because I honed in on that. Now, there's a lot of things that I don't even remember, and I have no use for right now. But that's what education is. You give information, and the students take whatever they take from whatever it's important to them, and they make a life. Because a lot of us all graduated, and people had A's and people had D's, but we still have a society. So I tell teachers, don't focus on the grades, focus on teaching. And if somebody's staring out the window like your brother, he was probably a dreamer thinking about things that nobody was thinking about. and he's probably going on to invent things that nobody's ever seen in the world.
Yeah, that was my husband, and he did invent many things that people use every day. Funny story about that too. He owned a company. Many years later, somebody came in to see him, a salesperson, and they said, "Oh, are you Richard Sherry? Did you go to, XYZ school?" "Yeah, yeah." He said, "You were the dumbest kid in the class."
Wow. Wow. Huh?
Here he is owning the company and so on. So he didn't turn out so badly.
Right.
But another funny story from that was he was in this math class and he, again, didn't pay much attention. Then the teacher put a problem on the board. And the teacher said, "Okay, everybody who wants to do this, solve this problem, we'll ask you to put it on the board next week." I think they gave him a week or 3 weeks or something to come up with this problem. So Richard looked at it and thought, "I could do that."
Hmm.
And he took it away. 3 weeks later, the teacher said, "Okay, who's got the answer?" And nobody put their hand up except Richard.
Mhm.
And the teacher said, "Put it down. You don't know it."
Wow.
And then the kids all laughed at him. And he said, "I have the answer. I have the answer." Teacher said, "You don't." But anyway, come up to the board, put it on. And then the teacher kept teaching.
Hmm.
Meanwhile, Richard is rubbing the board off, and there's 3 boards. And he took up all 3 boards to write the answer on.
Wow.
Finished it. Finally, the teacher turned around and said, "What the heck are you doing?" Looked at it and said, "That's all wrong." And he started to rub it off. And then he realized, no, that is correct.
Hmm.
And he said, "Can you just put back on what I just rubbed off?" She did. And from that moment on, Richard said, "Well, maybe I'm not so stupid after all. Maybe something's penetrated." And that story, he told it many times over the years
Hmm.
because that one incident got seared into his brain, remembering being humiliated in the class and then becoming victorious. And I'm sure you have stories about
Yes.
that.
Or hundreds. There was a young man, let me not mention any names, but there's a young man, horrible troublemaker. He found ways to get in trouble just to get attention. And then when you start looking at the parents are very busy working all the time. They didn't pay him any attention. And then he wasn't that popular. He didn't have the coolest clothes and stuff. This was a middle schooler. So he's always trying to get in trouble. And I'm looking at the student, not looking at the curriculum. I'm not looking at the grades. I'm looking at the student, at the person, which is why I say AI can't do that. I'm looking at the person. And I said, "What are you doing?" He says, "Well, I'm thinking about doing this." I said, "You know what? That's a very creative idea," because he was hashing up a plan to embarrass somebody. He's always creating something. He's always doing something. I said, "That's really creative. If you do that and you make that into a business, you could probably be a successful businessman." He had this look on his face that he was so confused, but delighted at the same time. Like nobody thought about him that way. His attitude changed in my class. He was no longer a troublemaker. He says, "Dr. Richard, I got an idea. What do you think about this?" I said, "You know what? If you change this," he's like, "Yeah, yeah." Every day, "I got another idea." So now his brain started working. I sparked something in him. Instead of looking at him like a troublemaker, I looked at his strengths. I looked at what he was good at because I looked at him like a human. And that's what teachers do. And another thing is he started helping me in class. So part of the things with the dynamic teaching framework, there's 3 core things that I put into the framework. It's problem-based learning, team-based learning, and peer teaching. That's a big part of the dynamic teaching framework. And when I put them in teams, sometimes the teams don't always work out. But this kid was like, "No, you guys have to do this, this, and this. Come on, come on, come on." But he actually helped me in class, all because I looked at what he was doing. He was bored and he wanted to contribute somehow to the world in his own way. Probably not thinking this way. He wanted to contribute to the world with something that's meaningful. And I made his ideas meaningful. And that meant the world to him. And he changed and he graduated, went on to high school. And his last year, I met him when he was in 7th grade, new kid, troublemaker. 8th grade, be an A student because he had it in him. But in 7th grade, C student, D student, he didn't care. He wanted somebody to recognize him. And I said, "I see you." And then he's successful to this day.
Isn't that fabulous?
Yes.
That it means so much because you saved a life there.
Oh, yeah.
It's one thing to save somebody physically, as I tried to do as a nurse, but when you are molding a mind and a spirit, then they're able to go out, and then that's a ricochet or an influence on everybody that's around them.
Absolutely.
And what an inspiring story. It'd be interesting to hear from him when he goes on to his next venture. Do you ever stay in touch with your students over the years?
I do. I try not to give them my personal information. I always get, Facebook requests. I recently coached a young man who was in high school to do his first TEDx. And he went on to win. He became the speech champion in the state of Florida. Then he went to the national championship. And when he was going to national, I was coaching him. I was calling him. And one of the kids on his debate team was my former student.
Oh,
And he called me and he says, can I get Dr. Richiez's number? Can you give me his number? And he called me to get permission. I said, yes. And the kid is doing great. So some of them reach out to me. One day I had someone do a request to do a Zoom meeting, a discovery call to learn about my business. And I said, that name looks familiar. And it was two of my former students. I
oh,
said, we couldn't get in contact with you. So when I do run into them and when I do see them, I'm very impressed. A lot of my former college students, now they're professionals and they're on LinkedIn and they connect with me, and every time I post something, they say, oh, he's the best teacher I've ever had. And I get all these different things. So it gives me that satisfaction that I made a difference in someone's life. And that's the reason why I got involved in education. That's one of the reasons. That feeling that you get is that fulfillment that a person needs. So when you're old and you're 100 years old and you're ready to go on to the next life, you look back and you made a difference in all these people's lives. That's that fulfillment that teachers get. And I want to bring that back to the teacher.
Well, you mentioned speaking, that you've done a lot of speaking. You and I met at the Florida Speakers Association,
Yes.
which is part of the National Speakers Association.
Awesome organization.
How has that influenced you?
So the Florida Speakers and the National Speakers Association, that's the business part of speaking. So they say there's public speaking, there's professional speaking. So public speaking, Toastmasters hands down is the best way to kind of craft your method of speaking and make you into a very good speaker. But the National Speakers Association and our chapter, the Florida Speakers Association, is the business side. So you can take your natural ability and make it into a business, and you can make money off of it. And you can actually work for yourself and make a living doing something that you love, especially with a certain kind of profession that you have. So I loved it. I learned so much from both organizations. Every time I meet someone at a conference, I ask them a question, they have the answer I'm looking for. And if they don't have the answer, they say, talk to such and such. Here, let me connect you to this person. Tell them I sent you. And that person usually has the answer. So it's a network of professional speakers that are doing the same thing I'm doing, trying to change the world in a positive way in all different types. I'm in education, all different types of industries and professions. I love it. I love it.
Yes, when I go to the breakfast meetings that we have every month, they have usually a featured top-notch international star speaking, and they are talking about the business side. A couple of them have talked about the importance of having a book. I believe you are an author.
Yes, I am.
Can you tell
I
me
am.
about that?
My first book is Becoming a Dynamic Teacher, and I felt compelled to write that because that was my journey, and that was my goal for other teachers. When that other teacher that used to listen to my classroom, he said, how can I be dynamic like you? And that's stuck in my mind. So I created a book called Becoming a Dynamic Teacher, which goes over a lot of my methodology and then some administrative things just to make you a little bit more dynamic. Then I wrote a second book that I'm very proud of called The 55 Laws of Teaching. And I did some intense research for a few years. And if I could create laws of teaching that make you successful and make a school successful, what would they be? And at first it was 25, then I discovered more, then it was 35, then it was 40, then it was 50. And I finally stopped at 55. And I think I have the blueprint to make somebody a successful, dynamic teacher. So it's called The 55 Laws of Teaching. You can find it on Amazon. I'm not trying to make $1 million off of it. I just want to give back to the community. And it's a blueprint for administrators and teachers alike to learn from and make the classrooms more dynamic for the students that we're here to serve.
I'm going to put a link in the show notes so that they can click on it and they'll be able to order the book on Amazon.
Sure.
And be able to get it. Well, are both your books on Amazon?
Yes, they are. They
Okay,
are.
so we'll make sure that they're available for them.
Okay.
And then do you also offer courses?
I do. If you go to myteachcraft.com, my Teachcraft system, I have a simple $49 course. It's a dynamic teaching mini course or the Teachcraft mini course. And I give you the basics, how to do certain things. It's about 9 different topics, but I actually have a community called the Teachcraft community. And you can join a group of teachers around the country who share ideas. So it's kind of like a Facebook type of Reddit type of going back and forth with different threads and answering questions and sharing ideas. But then for a little bit less than a cost of a steak dinner, $47 a year, you'll be a part of something a little bit bigger. So we have monthly calls. We focus on one topic on those calls. So we want to talk about engagement. We want to talk about classroom management. We all get together and talk about those. Then we have what's called the Burnout Prevention Program. So there's a lot of teachers that are burnt out. And there's an awesome book by another fellow teacher about how to prevent burnout. So we have an 8-week course where we get together on Zoom because I want people around the country to kind of engage. And we go over chapter by chapter how to prevent burnout. Right. So that's all included for this $47. And then I have the AI Collaboration Hub, which is another private group. and we go over how AI cannot replace teaching, but enhance what we're doing and make the administrative part a little bit easier. There'll be a softer landing when we get involved with all these different things. Like, for example, to create a dynamic lesson plan, sometimes that takes a lot of work. But when you use AI and you can grab things faster, you take all these tools, because I look at AI like a calculator.
Mm-hmm.
People thought the calculator was going to decimate the brains and it just made us go to the moon. So you take these tools and then use your creativity to make something really dynamic, and then you can change lives that way. So we have the AI Collaboration Hub. We have a lot of different resources, but it's just for teachers to help each other.
Yes. Well, I've been learning how to use AI. And as they say, AI, it has all the knowledge in the world because it can tap into everything. But it's not like you were saying, able to see somebody and read them on a psychology basis and then take that and apply it to a technique.
Mhm,
So AI, as you say, is like a tool.
mhm.
But to be authentic, to be really a real teacher and a leader, you need to bring your own personal self into it and
Absolutely.
apply what you've learned. That sounds like what you're doing
Absolutely.
on an ongoing basis. So you mentioned this TED Talk a few times. Can you tell me why did you decide to do the TED Talk and more about that?
So TED has their phrase, which is an ideal worth spreading. And I felt that being dynamic in the classroom and dynamic teaching per se is an ideal worth spreading. And I want everybody around the world to really think about the teaching profession. I called my TED Talk the paradox of teaching because I was a terrible student and I became a dynamic teacher. That was a paradox to me. I was a terrible, terrible student. And then here I am teaching, and people wanted to change their majors to come and learn from me. So that was paradoxical in itself. But also, the focus is wrong. A lot of people think that teaching is something that's going to be replaced by AI. AI is going to enhance it. But we need to be able to compete with the AI gamified world that we live in. And I want people to think about what the world will be like when a student wants to see a teacher as opposed to scroll on their phone. It's a very different experience. If that teacher can give them the same dopamine hits that you get on your phone, but now it's a person that sees you and can look at what your weaknesses are on the spot and help you the same way I helped that young man in middle school, that's going to mean the world for these students all over the place. And I want teachers to be able to feel that. So in looking at my TEDx, I wanted people to understand that's my mission. I wanted people to understand that everybody who's watching that TED Talk can really understand that they make a difference. Because at the end of my TED Talk, I say, you can be the difference. You could tell somebody to look at these three things: energy, vigor, and motion, and ask a teacher to consider using that in the classroom. Because that one person talking to the other person might be able to talk to that individual student who's going to find the cure for cancer.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Or something else that we really need. But teachers are the ones that really influence it. If you think about everybody in the world, like I said earlier, it's one teacher that made a difference in their life. And they can always point to that one teacher. And the things that I'm saying might influence that teacher to be that one person that makes the next Gandhi, Martin Luther King, John F. Kennedy, whoever it is in history that you admire, a teacher made a difference in their life. And that's why I'm for teachers. 100%.
And that's why you did the TED Talk, so you could get the word out into a bigger sphere.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Right. And so one of the other things is that everybody talks about emotional intelligence. Can you tell me more about how you use emotional intelligence?
Understanding a student's emotions is one of the things that teachers don't get paid for enough, because you see things as a teacher that parents don't see. Student is a different person at school,
Mm-hmm.
and you see a different side. So being a teacher, understanding how a student relates to someone else is key to that student's development. Think about it. Teachers spend about 6 hours with a student. And if the parents are busy when they go home, they don't spend 6 straight hours with a student, especially just teaching elementary. So emotional intelligence is important to everyone. And you have to understand your own level of emotional intelligence. And parents do a great job of that over the long term. But teachers can pinpoint things and help along with parents to make that student understand how they relate to the world. Because when I look at emotional intelligence, it's how you relate to everybody else emotionally. How you, instead of being a jerk, instead of being self-centered, see how you relate to everybody. The only reason why us as a species are successful is because we're very communal. We don't do things on our own. We can't exist without other people. So emotional intelligence is a key aspect of our lives. And teachers play a gigantic part in shaping that emotional intelligence for the students. When teachers tell students to be nice, to use kind words, that sticks in the student's brain subconsciously for a long time. And that plays a very, very big part in that.
Excellent. Okay. Just looking at some of the notes that I've made, one of the comments that I wrote down here is like, what common mistakes do schools make when they're trying to improve student performance? Is it like a factory, or is it like a funnel? Like, I remember just sort of going through the funnel. It wasn't like, but they were on Air Force bases, so things were very government oriented. Great teachers. I still remember my grade 3 teacher, I think, Miss Murphy. She taught me about apostrophes.
Wow.
And I have a lifelong passion about apostrophes.
Really?
Because people put them in the wrong place. You know, when they have IT apostrophe S and it's not supposed to have that really drives me crazy.
Wow. Wow.
But I'm sure that wasn't, I mean, other things she must have taught me, but that's what's stuck in my mind. But I think of those schools, it was just a place where we had to go. It was a funnel. What's mistakes that schools are making right now?
I'll tell you, some of the biggest mistakes that schools make today, in my opinion, they're putting the money on the wrong focus. So there's a lot of money for students and entertaining students, which is great. Students need all these extracurricular things and all these textbooks and everything, but they're not putting money in professional development of the teachers and the correct professional development. I'm not talking about administrative things. I'm not talking about how to create a lesson plan. The craft of teaching. See, there's a science of teaching. There's an art of teaching, but no one is teaching the craft of teaching.
The hands-on type of thing?
The hands-on, the on-the-spot. Now, some schools have coaches, but some of that coaching is limited, because the coaching that I do is I go to some schools and I sit with the teacher for about 4 hours, and then we come back, just like in Toastmaster. I give them an evaluation. I say, you could have done this differently. You should have done this. And that hands-on really molds teachers to do certain things. And that discussion, that ongoing discussion all year long, really shows them the craft of teaching, because sometimes you have to make decisions on the spot that are going to make a difference for students for the rest of their lives. And if you make a mistake, it takes a long time to fix that mistake. So I think the mistake that a lot of school districts make is not focusing on professional development. You know, I spoke to a school district, and their budget for teacher professional development was almost zero compared to their entire budget. We have more important things like safety. Yes, it's important. All these things are important. But put some into the person that makes the most difference in the school, which is the teacher. We put money into equipment, into books, into curriculum, into safety, but nobody's putting money into the person that makes the biggest difference. The person who has boots on the ground, in the classroom, face to face with the students that you're required to teach, the students that you have to make a difference in their lives. And not too many people are doing that. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Is there such a thing as CE? Like
Continuing education?
Yeah, I have to do CE every year for what I do.
Yes.
Is there a required CE for teachers?
For some of them there are. And it's a webinar that they put on while they're doing some paperwork or watching Netflix. And when it's finished, they answer the questions or they Google it. And that's not really crafting that teacher's profession. When you're a doctor and you get your MD, and you go into practice. When you're a lawyer, you get your JD, you go into the practice of law. And then you're under the tutelage of somebody who shows you the ropes for you to save someone's life as a MD, or for you to keep somebody from going onto death row as a lawyer. But who's doing that for teachers? It's very limited. There's not enough money and funding for that. So that's the biggest mistake that I think school districts are making, not focusing on the people that make the biggest impact on, if you want to call it the product that they put out in their community, which is their students. They're not putting enough attention on how teachers get better to mold the minds of the youth and the future.
So your program fills that void.
Yes.
It sounds like. So do you get hired by school districts to go in and do that?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
So there's corporations that hire you as well as educational institutions?
So corporations, not so much. Some corporations have hired me to do dynamic training because the training programs they feel aren't that great. When I worked at UPS many, many moons ago, and I became the trainer of new supervisors, and they loved what I was doing. And, you know, thinking back, I think that was the foundation of dynamic teaching, with the training portion of it. But yeah, some corporations hire me, mostly associations that want me to speak at their conferences. They hire me to speak about education, but primarily school districts, principals in private schools who understand the value of the teachers and what difference they make with students. Because the teachers are good, the students are going to learn. The students learn, academic grades go up. Academic grades go up, school gets accolades. School gets accolades, they get more funding, and it keeps on going. A lot of people miss that part. They think it's about everything else. Instead of playing defense, let's get the right curriculum. Let's make sure that everything is safe. Instead of playing defense, why don't we play offense and then push these students to greatness and make that one or two students that made a difference from that teacher become that international superstar in whatever profession that says, oh, I went to such and such high school. That's what schools need. Because when you see somebody who's great, what high school did they go to? Who was their teacher? Oh my God. I want every teacher to be that person that's going to make that person be successful.
That's one of the things I learned from Toastmasters. They give ribbons out a lot.
Yes, yes, yes. They
For,
do.
it's like Boy Scouts or Girl
Yes,
Guides or
yes,
Girl Scouts, as they call them here. But it's everybody likes to have an award.
yes,
And people in wars will fight and die for a badge
yes,
or a medal.
yes.
Does that happen in schools?
It does. It does. You know, there's a big back and forth debate about whether every kid gets a trophy, every kid gets a medal. I think every kid needs recognition. Doesn't have to be a trophy or a medal. Teachers can do that. You know, I've changed students' lives by giving them high fives every day. That student doesn't get any recognition. I give them a high five. They love it. Just giving them a high five, giving them a kind word, understanding that student, understanding what they did well. There was a young lady, she was a little self-conscious because she was a little overweight. So she wore this big, heavy jacket or one of those pullover hoodies. And she didn't want anybody to see what she looked like because that's where her focus was. She was a great artist.
Mm.
And I said, why don't you draw me this? Do me a favor, draw me. And she drew this, oh my God, beautiful picture of me that she started drawing stuff. Now the focus wasn't on what she looked like, because she made it that focus. Everyone else made that focus. It was on her art. And then she won an art contest at the school. Little things like that make a difference. It doesn't have to be a ribbon or a trophy for everyone, but everybody wants to be recognized, which is what you're talking about. Everybody wants to be recognized for the effort. That young man in middle school, all he wanted somebody to pay attention to him. There's another young man in 4th grade, Troublemaker, used to stand on desks and do all kinds of stuff just to get in trouble. And I realized with him, all he wanted some recognition. So in the morning when we were walking to class, I would look at him and say, where'd you get that hairdo? Why'd you decide to do that hairdo? What's going on with those sneakers? Anything to get his attention. So sometimes I made fun of him. Sometimes I complimented him. Sometimes I said, you want to hear a joke? I told him a joke. And the entire day didn't get in trouble. Just by doing that in the
Recognizing it.
morning, I saw him. And that's what teachers do.
Wonderful. Yes. Well, that's important. I'm just looking at the other questions that I had here, and I think we've covered just about everything.
I talk a lot.
No, but we've been having a great conversation. Is there anything that we haven't talked about, like something that you might be excited that you want to maybe describe a bit more, or something that we haven't touched on at all and you want people to know about?
No, I think we've covered a lot. I'm really excited about the future of education. I'm really excited about, people look at what's happening in the world with AI and technology and they get bummed out about it. I'm excited about it. Like I mentioned before, when we invented the calculator, they thought people's brain power was going to go down. No, we took the calculator and did great things and sent people to the moon. When we created a computer, they said, oh my God, that's it. Nobody's going to learn anything. And we took computers and we created all these different things. Now we have AI. All these things are tools. I'm excited to how AI now can help a teacher pinpoint what the needs of students are. The teachers know how to do that. That's what we talk about in the AI collaboration hub in Teachcraft. So I'm excited about all the new things that are coming out to use as tools, not as a replacement, as tools for teachers to make students great, to make students realize what their potential is, because that's what a teacher does. You know, the word educate comes from a Latin word educus, which means to bring out. A teacher's job is to bring out the greatness in that student. And there's so many tools now to help you bring out that greatness and see what's going on. Sometimes when I put the students in teams and I give them a problem and they're interacting with each other, I can see who the leaders are. I can see who the engineers are. I can see who the mathematicians are. I can see who the police officers are. I can see who the nurses are. I can see all of that in the classroom. And when I tell their parents at a parent-teacher conference or just on the phone, they're like, wow, I never saw. Ask Susie about this, ask Johnny about this, and you're going to see they're going to light up. And they say, thank you. That's what a teacher does. And that's what a dynamic teacher does, because you're not only teaching them, you're making their life better. And then working in conjunction with the parents, you're helping to groom these students into adults that make a difference. They're going to change the world for the better. And that's what I'm excited about. I'm excited about all the things that teachers are becoming and all these young people coming into the profession, all the ideas they bring. I'm really excited about that. And I'm excited to learn from them as well.
Sounds like it. You've got a great combination. So where can people keep up with you? I know that you mentioned your books. We're going to feature that. Do you have a website or do you have some
I
other
do.
way?
If you just go to anthonyrichiez.com, all of my stuff is there. To the business side of it, to the teacher side of it for Teachcraft, everything is on anthonyrichiez.com. There's a number there you can call and inquire about me speaking at your schools. All the links are there to my social, and you'll be able to get in contact with me and share ideas with me. Help grow this movement of making teachers dynamic. And I want dynamic teaching not to be a buzzword. I want every teacher to be dynamic. The definition of teacher should be synonymous with dynamic. Not, my God, he's going to talk me to death. No, that's not what a teacher is. A teacher is supposed to bring out the brilliance, and you can't do that unless you're dynamic.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure
Thank you,
speaking
Gail.
with you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.